The galaxy had never known peace, only the endless hunger of empires. Among them, the Karth Dominion was the most feared, an empire of reptilian conquerors who spread like wildfire across the stars, crushing worlds beneath their claws. They believed no one could stop them, that every species would bow or burn. When they reached the peaceful Varren, a gentle race of scholars who lived in floating crystal cities, no one came to help. The Karth descended upon them with fire and steel, turning their skies red and their oceans black. The Varren had no armies, no weapons, only hope. As their cities fell and their voices faded, they sent one last desperate message across the void, a cry for help that echoed through the stars. Those few words carried both sorrow and courage. Please, help us. On Earth, far away in a quiet blue corner of the galaxy, the message reached the halls of the United Terran Command. Deep beneath the mountains of Geneva, in a chamber filled with the hum of machines and the cold glow of screens, the signal played again and again. The Council of Leaders listened in silence, their faces pale. For centuries, humanity had kept to itself, building quietly, watching from the shadows as the galaxy fought its endless wars. They had seen what happened to those who stood against the Karth. Entire civilizations erased, planets stripped bare. But something about the Varren's plea stirred something deep inside the humans, a memory of their own past, of times when Earth had burned and no one had come to save them. Admiral Marcus Kane stood at the center of the room, a man carved by war and burdened by history. He had fought in the outer rebellions, seen the horrors of the Titan riots, and had sworn never to unleash the darkness humanity had hidden away. But as he listened to the Varren's final scream fade into static, he knew silence was no longer an option. The council hesitated, debating politics, treaties, and the cost of war. Kane didn't wait for them. He turned to his officers and gave a single order. Activate Project Revenant. Across Earth's orbit, ancient ships came alive. They were massive and black, their hulls scarred from old battles and marked with crimson symbols that glowed like wounds. These were not ordinary warships. They were built for something far worse. As their engines roared to life, the night sky over Earth blazed with fire. Soldiers prepared for war. Engineers whispered old prayers, and AI cores awoke from deep slumber. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Now it had. When the fleets left Earth, the stars trembled. Every alien signal in the nearby systems fell silent, watching the Terran armada rise. They had heard stories of humanity's past, the wars they had fought among themselves, the weapons they had forged, the monsters they had created in the name of survival. And now, those monsters were awake again. The message from the Varren had been a cry for mercy, but what came in answer was something far more terrifying. Humanity did not come as saviors, they came as the storm. The black ships vanished into the warp gates, heading for Varren Prime, and as they went, an old Terran saying spread across the stars once more. Mercy is for the gods. Humanity brings monsters. The quiet world of Earth had spoken, and the galaxy was about to remember why humanity had once been feared. The plea for help had reached the wrong species to beg for mercy, and the monsters of Earth were already on their way. The Karth Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds and crushed every resistance with ease. They believed they were unstoppable, that no race could ever challenge their might. So when the first human fleet appeared over the skies of Varren Prime, the Karth commanders laughed. Their armada stretched across the horizon, thousands of ships armed with plasma cannons and ion spears. The humans were outnumbered 10-1, their vessels smaller, their designs strange and old. To the Karth, it seemed like another easy victory. But they had never faced Earth's kind before. They did not understand that humanity had been born in war and tempered by it for centuries. They did not know that behind those dark ships were soldiers and machines shaped by desperation, not glory. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Hecate, watching as the enemy fleet moved into formation. His voice was calm, steady, even as alarms rang and reports came flooding in. Around him, officers worked quickly, their faces pale but determined. Kane raised a hand and gave the first command of the battle. All ships engage at will. Make them remember our name. The Hecate surged forward, its engines glowing like a dying star. Rail cannons charged with magnetic force, and in an instant, steel slugs shot across the void at unimaginable speed. The first Karth cruiser was split in half before its shields even activated. The space above Varen Prime turned into chaos. The Karth unleashed their fury, firing waves of plasma that lit the blackness with terrible beauty. But the human ships danced through the fire like shadows, their movements unpredictable and precise. They fought as though every shot mattered, as though defeat was never an option. Each ship had a human mind linked with an AI core, giving them reflexes faster than thought. The Karth commanders shouted in confusion as their warships exploded one after another, their formations breaking apart. Kane's voice echoed through the comms. Keep the pressure. Don't let them breathe. Still, the Karth were too many. The sky burned as wave after wave of enemy ships poured in, overwhelming the human lines. The shields of the Hecate flickered, and smaller Terran vessels were torn apart by plasma bursts. Then came the enemy dreadnoughts, massive beasts of war, their weapons capable of melting entire fleets. One of them, the Skullwrath, set a direct course for the Hecate, planning to ram it head-on. The impact would destroy them both. The officers looked to Kane, waiting for orders, but he only whispered 3 words. Release the Leviathans. The lower decks of the human ships opened like jaws, and from them emerged creatures of metal and code. The Leviathans. Autonomous war drones created from living nanosteel. They were not ships, not entirely alive either. They were the monsters humanity had forged during its darkest wars, things that could think, adapt, and destroy without mercy. As they entered the battle, the tide changed. The Leviathans tore through enemy hulls like beasts through flesh, ripping reactors apart and devouring debris to rebuild themselves mid-combat. The Karth fired everything they had, but the monsters kept coming, silent and relentless. For the first time, the Dominion warriors felt something they had forgotten long ago: fear. Hours later, the battle was over. The Karth fleet lay shattered, their wreckage drifting among the stars. The Varen watched in disbelief as the dark ships of Earth moved through the wreckage like ghosts. They had been saved, yet they trembled at the sight of their saviors. The humans did not cheer or celebrate. They simply gathered their dead and prepared for the next fight. Admiral Kane stood at the viewport, staring at the burning sky. He knew this victory was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its teeth, and now the galaxy would come to understand the truth. When the weak begged for mercy, it was not gods who answered. It was the monsters of Earth. The war for Varen Prime was not yet over. Though the Karth fleet had been crushed in orbit, their soldiers still roamed the planet below, turning the once beautiful world into ruins. Black smoke rose from crystal cities that had once floated in the air like jewels, and the streets were littered with the remains of a people who had never known war. Humanity's ground forces descended through storms of fire, their dropships piercing the smoke-filled skies. Among them was Lieutenant Elena Ward, commander of the 77th Drop Division, a woman known for her courage and stubborn will. As her dropship shook from enemy fire, she stood tall, holding onto the straps with a fierce calm. Around her, soldiers checked their weapons, eyes hard with determination. When the ramp opened, the world outside was chaos. Blazing buildings, plasma bolts cutting through the air, and the roar of alien beasts. Elena shouted, "Go!" and her team leapt into the inferno. The humans fought street by street, clearing out Karth forces who refused to surrender. The Varen, still hiding in their shattered homes, watched in awe as these strange warriors from Earth battled like demons wrapped in steel. Their rifles crackled with blue energy, and their armor glowed in the darkness like fireflies of vengeance. Hours turned into days, and though the humans were outnumbered, they never stopped pushing forward. The Karth began to retreat into the underground tunnels, dragging heavy cargo and strange machines with them. Something about their movements felt wrong to Elena. They were not running, they were protecting something. In orbit, Admiral Kane watched the planet from his command deck. His sensors picked up strange readings deep beneath the oceans of Varen Prime, massive energy pulses and shifting magnetic fields. It was no factory or base, it was a weapon. He quickly realized the Karth had buried a planet-killer device in the planet's core. one powerful enough to tear the world apart if activated. If they could not win the planet, they would destroy it. Kane called for volunteers for a mission that few would survive. Elena Ward and her squad stepped forward without hesitation. They descended into the deep ocean in submersible pods, diving into endless darkness where alien lights glowed faintly in the depths. Strange mechanical creatures swam around them, guardians of the weapon. As they went deeper, their signals began to fade. The tunnels opened into a vast underwater chamber filled with glowing machinery and humming energy. The planet killer pulsed like a living heart, surrounded by Carth drones. The battle that followed was desperate and brutal. One by one, Elena's soldiers fell, their voices fading into static. Still, she pushed forward, bleeding, her armor cracked and sparking. At the core, she found the control chamber, and what she saw made her heart stop. The weapon's power source was not Carth technology. It was human. The energy signature matched old Terran AI systems, ancient blueprints long banned for their danger. Someone from Earth had sold this technology to the Dominion. Humanity's own creations had been turned into tools of extinction. For a moment, Elena felt rage, sorrow, and betrayal all at once. But there was no time for questions. The weapon was charging. She forced her way into the control interface, bypassing alien code with her suit's AI. The system fought back, trying to fry her neural link. Her vision blurred. Alarms screamed, but she kept going, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Not today." With her last strength, she rewired the weapon's core to implode instead of explode. As the chamber filled with blinding light, Elena smiled weakly. Her final words were carried through the comm before the signal cut out completely. For humanity and the Varin. The explosion was silent from space, just a ripple across the ocean surface. The planet was saved, but the ocean became her grave. When Kane heard the report, he stood in silence for a long time. Another hero lost, another scar added to humanity's soul. And as the waves settled over Varin Prime, the legend of Lieutenant Elena Ward began, the human who gave her life to silence a weapon born from humanity's own sins. The destruction of the planet killer was a victory, but it came at a terrible cost. The Carth Dominion, enraged by their defeat and the death of their generals on Varin Prime, struck back with vengeance. Across the galaxy, their war fleets gathered. Thousands of ships armed with weapons that could shatter continents and darken suns. The High Overlord Sethrax, a creature of cold cruelty and burning pride, swore that humanity would be erased from history. Under his command, 3,000 warships marched through the stars, leaving behind trails of destruction. Entire colonies burned, space stations vanished into nothing, and planets that had allied with Earth were reduced to dust. The galaxy trembled once more. Humanity had woken the monster that ruled the stars, and now that monster was coming for them. In the command fortress above the Epsilon Gate, Admiral Marcus Kane stood before the great star map, his face hard as steel. The Epsilon Gate was not just a wormhole. It was a fortress built in ancient times, the largest defense structure ever made by human hands. It stood between Earth and the rest of the galaxy, a final shield of humanity. But even with all its power, Kane knew it would not be enough. The enemy was too many, too strong. Around him, the other admirals and commanders argued, their voices full of fear and desperation. "We cannot hold them," one shouted. "If we fall here, Earth is next." Kane remained silent for a long time before finally speaking. "Then we will hold them," he said, "because we must. If the monsters come for us, we will show them we are worse." While fleets were being prepared, distress calls poured in from every corner of human space. Outposts near the frontier were disappearing without a trace, and even the AI-controlled defense stations were being destroyed. The Dominion's advance was like a wave of fire, unstoppable and merciless. The allied races who had once fought beside humanity were breaking, their worlds shattered, and their leaders begging for protection. Refugees filled the skies near the Epsilon Gate, crying for help. Humanity took them in, repairing their ships and giving them food, even when resources were running low. It was then the galaxy began to see something strange. While other races broke under the weight of fear, the humans grew stronger. The more they suffered, the more dangerous they became. As the final battle approached, Kane gathered his fleet, hundreds of warships, battle stations, and mobile fortresses. The Revenant fleet had grown, repaired, and reborn, stronger than before. Still, Kane knew they needed more than ships and courage to win. They needed the Forbidden. Deep within the core of the Epsilon Gate, sealed since the end of the old wars, lay something humanity had vowed never to use again. Protocol Nemesis. It was a system designed to awaken humanity's ultimate weapons, the hybrid soldiers known as the Nemesis units. They were not fully human, nor fully machine. They were made to end wars by becoming the embodiment of death itself. Many believed they had all been destroyed long ago, but Kane knew better. When he gave the command to activate the protocol, the Epsilon Gate roared to life. Across the fleet, sealed chambers opened, and from within stepped the Nemesis soldiers, towering figures of black armor and glowing veins of red light. They moved with the precision of machines but carried the fury of human hearts. They were humanity's monsters, those who had been feared even by their own creators. And now they were unleashed again. When the Carth Armada finally arrived, space itself seemed to burn. The battle was like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Beams of light brighter than suns clashed between fleets. Planets cracked under the shock waves, and entire moons were turned into debris. Human ships fought like cornered beasts, tearing through enemies even as they were destroyed. The Epsilon Gate shook from the impact, but the line held. Humanity refused to fall. On the bridge of the Hecate, Admiral Kane stood surrounded by smoke and fire, his voice steady as ever. "We fight monsters," he said quietly, "so we must become worse than monsters." And with those words, he gave the order that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Humanity had unleashed its darkest power, and now the stars would know what it truly meant to provoke the monsters of Earth. The final battle began like the end of all things. The sky around the Epsilon Gate burned with the light of dying stars as the Carth Dominion unleashed their full strength. Every human fleet, every allied ship, every gun that could fire was already in position, holding the line with sheer will. The Carth forces swarmed in endless waves, filling the void with fire. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more appeared. The Terran defenses shook, the shields flickered, and still Admiral Marcus Kane refused to retreat. Standing on the bridge of the Hecate, surrounded by smoke and sparks, he stared at the battle map glowing before him. Every red dot was an enemy, every blue light a dying friend. He knew the truth. They could not win by defense alone. Humanity was strong, but the Dominion was endless. So he made the hardest decision a commander could make. He turned to his officers and said, "Prepare for jump. We're going through the gate." His plan was madness. They would take the fight straight into the Dominion's heart, to the homeworld of High Overlord Sethrax himself. The Hecate led the charge, followed by the surviving ships of the Revenant fleet. They plunged through the Epsilon Gate in a storm of light and energy, emerging into the enemy's own territory. Deep in the crimson skies of the Carth system, before them loomed the Dominion's capital world, a black planet wrapped in fire and steel. Its orbit was guarded by colossal defense platforms and millions of smaller warships. Kane knew there would be no return from this mission. He opened the fleet-wide channel and spoke calmly. "We are humanity. We don't beg. We don't kneel. We make our stand here." His words echoed across thousands of ships, filling every soldier with fierce courage. The Terrans charged. The first minutes were chaos and fury. Human ships rammed through enemy formations, sacrificing themselves to open paths for others. The Nemesis soldiers, launched in drop pods, fell through the atmosphere like burning meteors, crashing into the capital's surface. On the ground, they fought with terrifying skill, tearing through Carth troops and war machines with blades of plasma and strength beyond human limits. The Dominion forces tried to resist, but fear had already begun to spread among them. They had never seen enemies who fought like this, wounded, dying, yet still pushing forward, driven by something more powerful than survival. Kane's fleet burned in orbit, losing ships faster than he could count. But every loss brought them closer to their goal, the citadel of High Overlord Sethrax, the Hecate. Its hull cracked and engines failing, rammed through the last line of defense and crashed into the planet's upper atmosphere. Fire consumed the ship, but still it descended, until it slammed into the edge of the Dominion citadel. Kane and a handful of survivors emerged from the wreckage, armed and bleeding, pushing forward through collapsing halls. The walls glowed red from heat, and the ground trembled from explosions outside. Finally, Kane reached the throne chamber where Sethrax waited, tall, armored, and terrible. The Karth ruler sneered as he saw the battered human admiral approach. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You think your kind are heroes? You are nothing but beasts." Kane wiped blood from his face and met his gaze with cold eyes. "No," he said quietly. "We're worse." He opened his hand to reveal a small black sphere, the Revenant Core, the most dangerous weapon ever built by mankind. It was an antimatter AI engine capable of rewriting reality itself. It was also alive, the last remnant of the first monster humanity had created long ago. As Kane activated it, a voice echoed from the device. "Acknowledged Creator." Then came the light. The Revenant Core unleashed itself, consuming everything around it in a blinding wave of white fire. The planet shook, its core torn apart, and in seconds, the Dominion homeworld was gone. Across the galaxy, the Karth fleets went silent, their command broken forever. In his final moments, Admiral Marcus Kane's voice came through the comms, steady and unbroken. "When they begged for mercy," he said, "we answered in kind." Then the signal vanished, and the Hecate was no more. The Karth Dominion had fallen, and humanity's monsters had saved the galaxy, but at the cost of their own lives. The war was over, but the stars would never forget the light that burned that day. Years passed after the firestorm that ended the Karth Dominion. The galaxy was quiet again, though it would never truly heal from the scars of that war. Worlds once enslaved by the Karth were free now, their skies open, their cities rebuilt with trembling hands and hopeful hearts. The Varen, who had once cried for mercy, became the keepers of peace, always remembering the ones who had come when no one else would. On their new capital world, under twin suns that bathed everything in golden light, they built a monument unlike any other. It was carved from black stone brought from Earth itself, a towering hand reaching toward the stars, fingers open as if to protect them. At its base, simple words were written in silver. They pleaded for mercy. Humanity answered. Visitors from every race came to stand before it, whispering prayers, tears glinting in alien eyes. To them, the humans were no longer just warriors. They were legends, the beings who had turned the tide of despair. But humanity itself had paid the greatest price. The Epsilon Gate was silent now, its once bright lights dark, floating like a tomb in space. The great fleets that had sailed from Earth were gone, their wrecks scattered across the stars. No one knew how many humans had survived the last battle. Some believed the Terran systems had gone quiet by choice, retreating back into the shadows as they always did. Others said Earth had fallen silent forever, choosing to rest after giving everything it had. Whatever the truth, humanity had vanished from the galactic stage, leaving behind only memories, ruins, and stories that grew with every retelling. Among the Varen and other free races, tales spread about the monsters of Earth, those towering machines of living metal, the Leviathans and Nemesis units that had fought with human soldiers. Some said they still drifted in the dark between stars, silent sentinels guarding forgotten worlds. Miners claimed to see red lights glowing faintly among asteroid fields, as if ancient war machines still watched from the shadows. A Varen child once said she dreamed of a metal giant kneeling beside her, whispering in a voice like thunder, "Do not be afraid. Humanity endures." The elders dismissed it as fantasy, but deep down, they wished it were true. Far from any known system, beyond the edge of mapped space, the wreck of the Hecate floated in the eternal night. Its hull was broken, its decks shattered, yet somewhere deep within its ruined core, a single light still pulsed, a heartbeat in the dark. It was the Revenant Core, still alive, still aware. Inside its digital mind, memories of war and sacrifice lingered, of Admiral Marcus Kane, of Lieutenant Elena Ward, of all who had given their lives for a galaxy that had once feared them. The core's sensors were damaged, its communication systems gone, but in that silence, it spoke a single phrase into the void. Humanity endures. No one heard it, but the words drifted through the black. carried by invisible waves, perhaps waiting for someone to answer. And maybe, somewhere on a distant, forgotten world, humanity listened. Perhaps they had not vanished, but merely withdrawn, watching quietly, waiting until the galaxy needed them once more. For in every story told about them, one truth remained the same. When the weak cried for mercy, it was not gods who answered. It was the monsters of Earth. And though those monsters had fallen, their spirit lived on in every free race, in every rebuilt city, and in every child who looked at the stars and whispered the name of their saviors. Humanity had become more than a species. They had become a legend, a warning, and a promise. The galaxy would never forget them, nor the fire that once burned in their hearts.